Okay, so today we're going to be looking at kind of a budget deck. It's kind of a control deck. It's a Blue Black Reanimator. I'm going to go over the deck tech first off here, and then we're going to get into some games. So, the basic gist of this deck is to put powerful creatures in your graveyard and then bring them back to life using Rise from the Grave, which is a sorcery, 5 mana, 1 black, 4 colorless. Put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. That creature is a black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. So I like this card. There's another card that you could use called Ever After, which is a 6 mana sorcery, black, black, and 4, I believe. And it allows you to put 2 creatures from your graveyard onto the battlefield. I like this one better because it allows you to take a creature from any graveyard. So, for example, you're playing against Delirium deck, and they mill Emrakul in the middle to late game. Maybe they don't have the ability to bring them back right away. Maybe they got to wait a turn. When it's your turn, you can bring back the Emrakul, and get a big blocker. Obviously, with Emrakul, he's not an enter the battlefield, or she's not an enter the battlefield effect creature, so you don't really get anything besides the big body, but it helps out. So we have 4 of those, obviously, because that's our big plan. To help out with that, we have 4 Mindrak Demons, which Mindrak Demon, 4 mana creature, 2 black, 2 colorless, flying, trample, 4/5, tough creature in itself. When Mindrak Demon enters the battlefield, put the top 4 cards of your library into your graveyard. So that's good to further our plans. We can mill something else that is big into our graveyard. And then it has Delirium at the beginning of your upkeep. You lose 4 life unless there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyards. Which just means if you don't have Delirium, you lose 4 life every turn, which sucks. But, which is kind of why we have to play around. So we have a couple of enchantments as a removal here. Well, 3. We have Dead Weights. Enchanted creature gets -2/-2. We also have Oath of Jaces, which is some of our card draw, and as well some discard. So when it enters the battlefield, 3 mana, you draw 3 cards and then discard 2 cards. So that can help us fuel up as well as provide for Delirium. We also have some instants in removal. We have To the Slaughter, which is target player sacrifice a creature or planeswalker, and Delirium, they have to sacrifice a creature and a planeswalker instead of which is kind of our only way to get rid of planeswalkers outside of beating them up with creatures. Then we have Murder, 3 mana, kill a creature, destroy a creature, and then we have Grasp of Darkness, 2 black, target creature gets -4/-4. So along those with Deadweight, that's kind of our removal suite. Then we have some card draw as well. So we have Glimmer of Genius, which is an instant, scry 2, then draw 2 cards, and you get 2 energy. Now the energy is kind of important because one of our reanimation targets uses that quite well. So for another way that we have to, in the early game, build up our graveyard is a Wharf Infiltrator. So 2 mana, 1/1, and with Skulk, so it means it can only be blocked by creatures with the same power or less. So whenever Wharf Infiltrator deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card, which is really important in the early game before, if you can get that going before Oath of Jace or Mindrak Demon, etc. So our reanimation targets are twofold. We have some value targets, which we can actually cast. So we have 2 Noxious Gearhulks and 2 Torrential Gearhulks. So Noxious Gearhulk, when it enters the battlefield, you may destroy another target creature. If a creature is destroyed this way, you gain life equal to its toughness. So it's 6 mana. We can definitely cast this because we're blue-black. And it's kind of value. So we cast that in the middle to late game, gets us some value, and then we can bring it back for even more value. Then we have Torrential Gearhulk, which is same kind of thing, except when it enters the battlefield, it also has Flash, which is good for instant blocking in cases or end of opponent's turn to get back a removal spell, something like that. When it enters the battlefield, you may cast target instant card from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that card will be put into the graveyard this turn, exile it instead. So once again, good in the middle game when we can flash back, a Glimmer of Genius or a removal spell, and then good in the late game, if it dies, we can bring it back and do the same thing again. Now our big payoff cards are the Decimator of Provinces. So this is a 10 mana Eldrazi Boar creature with a merge. We're not even going to probably try to cast this ever. But when you cast it, creatures you control get +2/+2 and gain trample until the end of turn. It's a 7/7 with trample and haste. So this is basically a purely reanimation target. We're going to try to reanimate this. We're not going to try and cast this most likely. The other ones we have are Demon of Dark Scheme. So this is a 6 mana creature. This one is castable, but 3 black can be kind of steep. sometimes. When it enters the battlefield, all other creatures get -2/-2 until the end of turn, and then when another creature dies, you get 1 energy. And if you pay 3, 2 colorless, 1 black, and 4 energy, you can put a creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control tapped. So that's kind of good. Say we've gone, run out of Rise from the Graves, and we still need to reanimate stuff to win the game. We can definitely use this to get that done. And then we also have Sphinx of the Final Word, which is a 5/5 flying hexproof, and instant sorcery spells you control cannot be countered by spells or abilities. So once again, we can cast this, but this is more likely a reanimation target. Just a good blocker, and obviously protects your spells. So then in the sideboard, we have some tools to fight against our big problems. We also have another really big reanimation target in Kozilek. So Kozilek is really cool. When you cast Kozilek, if you have fewer than 7 cards, you draw equal to the difference. We're probably never ever going to cast this because we don't really have any colorless sources. But when we reanimate it, it has this really cool thing where you can discard a card with a converted mana cost of X, and you can counter a target spell with converted mana cost X, which can be very, very powerful. I was running an older version of this deck during Origins, and I definitely won some games with Kozilek with that counter ability. So outside of that, we have we have Harsh Scrutiny, which is kind of like Duress, if you know what Duress does. A little bit different. Target opponent reveals their hand, you make them discard a creature card from it, and you scry 1. So this is good for, early game, getting rid of problem creatures like, making them discard their Emrakul early, making them discard some private or some hard to deal with creatures, etc. We also have Shamble Backs. There's 2 of these. So you exile a target creature card from a graveyard, you create a 2/2 zombie, and you gain 2 life. So once again, this is good against graveyard synergy. So if they have creatures in their graveyard that they're going to try and bring back with Grapple with the Past or something like that, you can exile them and get a token and gain some life off of that. We also have Corpse Churn, which is you put the top 3 cards of your graveyard into your, or top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard, and then you can return a creature card to your hand. So that's powerful to get back. Like, say we don't have a Rise from the Graves, but we have enough mana to cast like a Gear Hulk or a Mindrack Demon or, whatever else, a Sphinx maybe. We can get it back without having to use Rise from the Graves if we don't have it. We have 2 Whispers of Emrakul, which kind of go along with the Harsh Scrutiny. So target opponent discards a card at random, and then with Delirium they discard 2 cards at random, which can be very powerful because we need Delirium in this deck for our Mindrack Demons, and it's pretty easy to get sometimes. And then we have Pour Over the Pages, which is another way of drawing cards. So draw 3 cards, untap 2 lands, and then discard a card. So it's just some more value type spells. And then we have Diabolic Tutor. So I used to run a similar deck, but I used to use the Spell Mastery version of this card, which was the 5 mana one. I can't remember the name off the top of my head from Origins. Pay 5 mana, grab a card, and then you get 3 black mana back. We would have that card in here if we could, but we don't, so we have Diabolic Tutor. It just helps you search for your answers for stuff. And then we have some counter magic. So we have Ceremonious Rejection to counter colorless spells. So you can use these early game to counter like Smuggler's Copters. You can also use it to counter, Emrakuls, any other potential artifacts that can be a problem, Panharmonicon, stuff like that. Summary Dismissal. Once again, this is pretty much purely for Emrakul. Exile all other spells and counter all abilities. Okay, so that's a deck tech. I'm going to say this was a budget deck. I'll link this over here. So I posted the deck list in Card Hoarder to get the price, and we have here 46.9 tickets or $43.78 US. So if you're in Canada, it's going to be a little bit more. But yeah, the most expensive card in this deck are the Torrential Gear Hulks. They're about $9 for the pair of them on MTGO. $9 US and $9.63 or 9.63 tickets on MTGO. The rest of it is pretty cheap. Nothing else really that can break your bank. So we'll get this started. We'll get into some games right away.